You ever reach a point in life where the people you love most turn into strangers? I never thought I'd be that father, the one left out of his own son's wedding. But weeks before the big day, my boy looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dad, if you show up, you'll ruin everything." Those words burned into me like a hot iron. I raised him, I sacrificed for him, and in one sentence he erased decades of love. So I stayed away, or at least that's what he thought. Fast forward to the wedding day. The church was filled with flowers and whispers. I sat hidden in the back, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The priest's voice echoed through the room. "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." That was my moment. My legs trembled, but I stood up anyway. And what I said next changed everything. By the time I was done, the bride's veil was on the floor, and my son's perfect day had turned into something none of them would ever forget. Stick with me, please subscribe and share, because this story, this revenge, is one you'll never see coming. They say a father's love for his son is unconditional. I used to believe that. I believed it through scraped knees, late-night fevers, and the countless times I worked double shifts just so he could have the shoes he wanted or the new textbooks for school. I believed it through every sacrifice my late wife and I made, giving up vacations, selling my old car, even putting off much-needed repairs to our house because our boy, Daniel, deserved the best start we could give him. When my wife, Margaret, passed away 8 years ago, I thought Daniel and I became closer than ever. We had to. It was just the two of us against the world. I still remember the night of her funeral. We sat on the back porch and he told me with tears in his eyes, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll never leave you. You'll always have me." I held on to those words. I carried them with me like a lifeline in the years that followed. Even when he moved into his own apartment, I never felt left behind. He called every week. We had Sunday dinners. And when he brought home Emily, the woman who would later become his fiancée, I was genuinely happy for him. She was polite, charming, and she laughed at my corny jokes. I thought she was a good fit for him. But I didn't know that night, shaking her hand in my living room, that Emily would become the wedge driven between us. It didn't happen all at once. At first, she was sweet, always asking if I needed anything, bringing over a pie or some baked treat when she came along for Sunday dinner. But little by little, things began to change. The first crack appeared about a year into their relationship. Daniel called to say he wouldn't make our usual Sunday dinner. "Emily's parents invited us over, Dad," he said. "It's just for tonight. You understand, right?" Of course I understood. Relationships mean compromise. But then the skipped dinners became more frequent, twice a month, then once every few months. When I suggested maybe we could all eat together, me, Daniel, and Emily, she always seemed to have a reason why it wouldn't work. One night, while helping him move some boxes into their shared apartment, I overheard Emily talking to him in the kitchen when she thought I was out of earshot. "Your dad's nice, but he's a bit much sometimes, isn't he? Always trying to insert himself." The word stung. Insert myself? I was his father. I brushed it off, convincing myself I misheard or misunderstood. But after that, I noticed Daniel's tone with me start to change. He became more distant, more guarded, as if every conversation had an invisible wall between us. The announcement of their engagement should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I imagined hugging my son, congratulating him, maybe sharing a drink to celebrate. Instead, I got a text message. "Dad, Emily and I are engaged. We're having a small celebration tonight with her family." I wasn't invited. I tried to ignore the pit in my stomach. Maybe it was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. But when I called to congratulate him, he seemed distracted, almost annoyed. "Thanks, Dad. We're keeping things kind of private right now. We'll talk about wedding stuff later, okay?" Weeks later, I finally got the call. "About the wedding," Daniel began. "We've decided on a small guest list. Really small. Mostly friends and close family." I laughed. "Well, I'd hope I'm considered close family." There was a pause. Too long of a pause. "Of course," he said quickly, but the way he said it, it didn't sound convincing. I tried to get excited, asked if I could help, maybe with expenses, maybe with planning. That's when his voice shifted into something colder. "Dad, I need you to understand. Emily has a certain vision for the day. She wants everything to be perfect. And well, she's worried about you." "Me?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "She thinks you might make things awkward." I felt like someone had just punched the air out of me. "Awkward? Daniel, I'm your father. Why would I make things awkward?" He hesitated again. "It's just, sometimes you say things or tell stories. She doesn't want any scenes." Scenes. That word lodged itself deep in my chest. Like I was some embarrassing old man who couldn't be trusted to behave. The real blow came 2 weeks before the wedding. Daniel called me. His tone was flat, rehearsed like he'd practiced the lines in front of a mirror. "Dad, I think it's better if you don't come to the wedding." I was silent for a long moment. "Better for who?" I finally asked. "For everyone," he said. "You'll ruin the day if you're there." Those words, they didn't just sting. They cut deep, right down to my bones. I felt heat rise to my face, my vision blurring with a mix of hurt and rage. All I could manage was, "If that's what you want." And I hung up. The days that followed were some of the loneliest I've ever lived through. I kept thinking back to all the times I'd been there for him, the scraped knees, the broken heart after his first girlfriend left him, the college tuition I worked overtime to help pay. And now I was a burden, an inconvenience, an embarrassment. I didn't leave the house much in those days. Even my neighbors noticed. One evening, old Mrs. Lawson from across the street brought over a casserole. "Heard about the wedding?" she said softly. "Don't let it eat you alive, John. People show their true colors when it comes to big events." Her words stuck with me. True colors. Maybe I hadn't wanted to see Daniel's before. I tried to busy myself with small projects, fixing the fence, reorganizing the garage, but every nail I hammered felt like it was driving deeper into the thought that my own son didn't want me at his wedding. Then, about a week before the big day, I got a call from my sister, Karen. She'd been invited to the wedding. "John," she whispered over the phone, "I don't know what's going on, but something's not right. Emily's family has been saying some things about you. Nasty things." My heart sank. "Like what?" "That you're controlling. That you tried to tell Daniel who he could marry. That you make scenes." I was stunned. "That's not true. That's completely made up." "I know," she said. "But John, I think they're trying to keep you away on purpose. And it's working." That night, I sat at my kitchen table until well past midnight, a cup of cold coffee in front of me, staring into nothing. If they thought I'd just disappear quietly, they were wrong. 2 days later, I made a decision. I would go to the wedding. Not to cause chaos. Not to scream or fight. But to be there. To look my son in the eye and let him know that no matter what lies had been told, I wasn't the villain in this story. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Karen. If word got out, they'd find a way to stop me. I still remember the morning of the wedding. The air was crisp, with that faint smell of rain in the distance. I dressed in my best suit, the same one I wore to Margaret's funeral. It felt almost poetic, like I was burying something else that day, the illusion of the bond one thought my son and I shared. I drove to the church early, parking a few streets away. I walked the rest of the distance, my heart pounding, hands shoved into my pockets to keep them from shaking. From the back pew I could see everything. The flowers, the guests, the smiles. And there at the front, my son looking every bit the handsome groom and Emily radiant in her gown. The ceremony began. I sat still, invisible, my eyes fixed on the moment I knew was coming. The moment the priest would speak those fateful words. If anyone here has reason why these two should not be wed. And as the words began to form on his lips, I felt something inside me harden into resolve. I knew then. I wasn't leaving this church the same way I came in. Sitting in that church, hidden in the shadows of the back pew, my mind was a storm. Every smile I saw on their faces felt like a knife. But before I tell you what happened in that moment, you need to understand why I couldn't just sit at home and let this wedding happen without me. The weeks before that day weren't just filled with hurt, they were filled with insults. Insults I never thought I'd hear from my own flesh and blood. It started the morning after Daniel told me not to come. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd call back and apologize. That maybe he'd had a bad day or Emily had pressured him and he'd realize how wrong he was. But instead, I got a phone call from someone I never expected, Emily's mother. "John," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I think we both know it's for the best if you sit this one out. Emily has been very patient with you, but this is her day." "Patient with me?" I repeated, my voice tightening. She didn't hesitate. "Yes. Daniel told us about your controlling ways. About how you've always tried to micromanage his life. I'm sure you mean well, but sometimes a father has to let go." Let go? I'd given Daniel his independence. I'd supported every decision he made, even the ones I didn't agree with. But in her voice, I heard something darker, the satisfaction of someone who believed she'd won. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. Later that week, I got another piece of the puzzle. Karen called again. "John, you're not going to believe this," she said. "I overheard Emily's cousin telling guests that you got drunk at Thanksgiving and threatened Daniel." I almost dropped the phone. "That never happened. I don't even drink." "I know," she said. "But John, people are talking. They're making you sound like some dangerous, bitter old man." Dangerous? Bitter? That's what they wanted everyone to believe. That's how they justify keeping me away. One night, I sat in my living room with the old family photo albums spread out on the coffee table. There was Daniel at 5 years old, holding a toy truck I'd saved 3 months to buy him. Daniel at 10 with me at his school science fair. Daniel at 16, beaming in his first suit for prom. I traced my finger over the photos, wondering, where did I lose him? When did my son stop being my son? The answer, I realized, was simple. The moment Emily decided she didn't like the space I took up in his life. Karen suggested I write him a letter, something heartfelt, something that might reach him without Emily's filter. I stayed up half the night writing it. I told him about the day he was born, how I cried in the hospital when the nurse placed him in my arms. I told him about Margaret's last words to me, "Take care of our boy," and how I'd tried my best every single day since. I told him I didn't want to ruin his wedding. I just wanted to be there. I mailed it the next morning. A week passed. No reply. Then came the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, of course, but Karen went. She called me afterward, her voice trembling. "John, you should know they made jokes about you." Emily's brother actually stood up during his toast and said, "At least we won't have any drunken outbursts from the father of the groom." People laughed at me, at a lie. And my own son sat there and let it happen. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the laughter over and over again. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to attend that wedding. I was going to make sure the truth was heard. The closer it got to the big day, the more information seemed to trickle in, like the universe was feeding me pieces of a puzzle. A neighbor who worked at the catering company told me he overheard Emily saying she wished Daniel's deadbeat dad would just stay away. Deadbeat. I worked myself to the bone to provide for him, and this is the narrative she was spinning? Karen later told me about a conversation she'd had with one of Daniel's childhood friends. Apparently, Emily had told the inner circle that I'd tried to sabotage the wedding by spreading rumors about her family. I hadn't said a word about them to anyone, but I could see what was happening. They were building a wall of lies so tall that by the time the wedding came, no one would believe a thing I said. I spent the night before the wedding going over my plan. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to curse. I wasn't going to make myself look like the bitter old man they'd painted me as. I was going to be calm, measured, and devastatingly truthful. Still, I couldn't help but feel the ache of what was being taken from me. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about losing my place in my son's life. It was about being rewritten as the villain in a story I'd built my whole life around. That morning, I woke up before the sun. I made coffee, but it sat untouched. I ironed my suit, polished my shoes, and placed my late wife's locket in my breast pocket. Margaret had always been my anchor. If she were alive, I knew she'd be standing right beside me, ready to set the record straight. Before I left the house, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked myself in the eye. "You're not going there to start a fight," I told myself. "You're going there to tell the truth." When I got to the church, I took my place in the back, careful not to draw attention. From there, I had the perfect view not just of the ceremony but of the people. I saw Emily's mother scanning the crowd, probably making sure I wasn't there. I saw Emily herself, laughing and chatting with the bridesmaids, her smile wide and fake. And I saw my son. He looked nervous, but he didn't look around for me. As the guests settled, Karen slipped in and found me. Her eyes widened when she saw I was actually there. "John, are you sure about this?" she whispered. I nodded. "I'm not leaving without saying my piece." She bit her lip but didn't argue. Instead, she sat a few rows ahead, close enough to hear everything but far enough to avoid suspicion. The music began. The bridesmaids walked in one by one. Then Emily appeared at the end of the aisle, her arm linked with her father's. Every head turned. Phones came out. It was the picture-perfect moment. Until my gaze landed on the man standing at the altar with my son. It wasn't just the best man. It was Daniel's college roommate, Mark, the one he'd once confessed to me had feelings for Emily before she started dating Daniel. Something twisted in my gut. Why would Daniel choose him for this role after everything? I couldn't shake the thought, and suddenly the pieces began to click together. The distant phone calls. The skipped dinners. The whispers. What if Emily had been playing both sides all along? The ceremony continued, but my focus was gone. I watched Mark steal glances at Emily. I watched Emily smile at him just a little too long. It wasn't my imagination, there was something there. And then I remembered something Karen had mentioned weeks earlier. She'd seen Emily and Mark at a cafe together, alone, long after Daniel had left town for a work trip. Back then, I dismissed it as coincidence. Now, it looked like the final nail in the coffin. The priest's voice broke through my thoughts. And now, if anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The room fell silent. And for a moment I hesitated. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the couple at the altar. No one noticed me, yet. I could let it go. I could stand up quietly and walk away, sparing myself the confrontation. I could stand up and expose everything, the lies, the manipulation, and the truth about who Emily really was. And in that moment I knew. I'd been quiet long enough. The silence after the priest's words was thick. You could feel it pressing down on the pews, on the air itself. 100 people holding their breath at the same time. And in that silence, I stood. There was a ripple through the crowd, heads turning, whispers starting. I saw Karen's eyes widen. Emily's mother went pale. And my son. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. Dad. Daniel's voice cracked. It wasn't warm, it wasn't welcoming. It was sharp, edged with panic. I could see the muscles in his jaw tightening, his hands clenching at his sides. The priest's eyes darted between us, clearly unsure if he should intervene. I have an objection, I said, my voice low but steady. Gasp. Murmurs. A chair creaked as someone shifted uncomfortably. Emily's face twisted into something I'd never seen before, not the sweet smile she'd worn around me in the early days, but a tight, cold glare. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice carrying more venom than she probably meant to let slip. "I'm here," I said slowly, "because I think there's something Daniel needs to hear before he makes the biggest mistake of his life." The priest tried to cut in. "Sir, this isn't." But Daniel raised a hand to stop him. "No. Let him talk," my son said, his voice hard. That surprised me. Maybe deep down he did want to know. Or maybe he thought he could shut me down publicly, humiliate me, and be done with it forever. Either way, I wasn't wasting the chance. I stepped into the aisle, my shoes echoing against the stone floor as I walked toward the front. Every pair of eyes followed me, some curious, some angry, some pitying. "I've been painted as the villain here," I began, turning to face the guests as much as the couple. "I've been called controlling, bitter, dangerous. I've been told I'd ruin this wedding just by showing up. And most of you probably believe that, because that's the story you've been fed." Emily shifted, her hand tightening on Daniel's arm. I saw her mouth something to him, "Don't listen." "But the truth," I continued, "is a little different. And it's not about me. It's about what's been happening behind Daniel's back." The murmurs got louder. Someone in the second row leaned forward, eyes wide. Even the priest looked torn between stopping me and hearing what I had to say. "I didn't want to be here today," I said. "I wanted to remember my son's wedding as a happy day, even if I had to experience it from afar. But then I learned things I couldn't ignore." I turned my gaze to Daniel. "You remember when you told me you had to work out of town for a week? The same week Karen saw Emily at a cafe with someone else." Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Emily laughed, but it was the brittle, nervous kind of laugh. "Oh my God, John, are you seriously doing this? You're going to stand here and make up garbage because you can't stand that you weren't in control?" I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on my son. "Daniel, it wasn't just coffee. And it wasn't just anyone. It was Mark." You could have heard a pin drop. Mark, standing there as best man, froze like a deer caught in headlights. Daniel turned his head slowly toward him. Mark? Mark stammered. It wasn't like that. Emily jumped in. Don't be ridiculous. We're friends, that's all. We were talking about your surprise party. I shook my head. Then maybe you can explain the late-night visits to his apartment. The ones your neighbors saw. The ones that happened more than once. The crowd erupted into whispers. I could see faces shifting, suspicion, judgment, the beginnings of doubt in Emily's carefully curated image. Daniel's face went red. Is this true? He asked Emily, his voice low but dangerous. Of course not, she snapped, but her eyes darted toward Mark. It was the smallest movement, but in that moment, it was everything. I took another step closer. Daniel, I didn't want to believe it either. But the more I stayed quiet, the more I realized that silence is exactly what they were counting on. They've spent months turning you against me, convincing you I was a problem, because if I was out of the picture, you'd never hear the truth. I let the words hang there. You could feel the tension crawling through the air. Emily's father stood abruptly. All right, that's enough. You're ruining their day. No, Daniel said, his voice cutting through like a blade. Let him finish. Emily's eyes widened. She turned on Daniel. Babe, don't do this. He's lying. He's jealous. Jealous of what? I asked, my voice sharper now. Of losing my son to a woman who's been betraying him behind his back? The guests were fully locked in now. Some leaned forward like they were watching a car crash they couldn't look away from. I'm not perfect, I said. I've made mistakes as a father. But I have never lied to you, Daniel. And I've never stood by while someone else did either. I kept quiet for too long, thinking maybe I was overreacting. But when I heard what they were saying about me, that I was dangerous, controlling, a drunk, I knew I wasn't dealing with simple misunderstandings. I was dealing with people willing to destroy anyone who threatened their version of the story. I turned to face Emily fully now. You've done a good job convincing everyone I'm the problem. But there are some things you can't spin. Like the text messages. Her head snapped toward me. What messages? She demanded, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes. The ones Mark's ex-girlfriend sent me, I said. She reached out after she heard the rumors about me. Apparently she'd seen enough. She sent screenshots, you telling Mark you wished you'd chosen him instead, that you couldn't stand the way Daniel still ran to Daddy for advice, and that you were going to make sure that stopped. The gasp that went through the room was like a physical wave. Emily's composure cracked. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked cornered. Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper. Is that true? Emily shook her head violently. No. He's twisting things. You know how your dad is. But Mark's face told another story. He wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. His shoulders slumped, his jaw tight. Daniel turned to him, his voice sharp. Mark, tell me right now, did anything happen between you and Emily? Mark hesitated. And in that hesitation, Daniel had his answer. I stepped back, giving my son space, but my heart was hammering. I didn't come here to watch him crumble. I came here to free him from the trap he didn't know he was in. The priest cleared his throat, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. This is highly irregular. Yeah, Daniel said bitterly. So is finding out your fiancé has been lying to you. Emily's voice went high and desperate now. Daniel, listen to me, it was nothing. We were just talking, it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? He exploded. You spent months convincing me my own father was toxic so you could What? Keep me from hearing the truth? The room was dead silent again. No one dared move. Even the children in the back were quiet, sensing the gravity of the moment. Emily's eyes darted around the room looking for an ally. But the faces staring back at her were no longer charmed. They were cold, judging. And then, she made her mistake. She turned to me, her voice dripping with venom. You happy now? You've destroyed your son's wedding day. You've humiliated him in front of everyone he knows. You're exactly the selfish, bitter man I said you were. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Emily, I said evenly, the only person who destroyed anything here is you. The difference is I did it in the open. You did it in the shadows. The words landed like a hammer. Daniel closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something was different. The anger he'd been directing at me for months was gone. In its place was something else. Realization. He turned back to the priest. I think we're done here. Gasp. Emily's face went white. You can't just call it off. Everyone's here. Daniel's voice was cold now. I don't care if the Pope is here. I'm not marrying someone who's been lying to me and tearing my family apart. It should have felt like victory, but in that moment I just felt tired. The damage was done. The truth was out, yes, but the wreckage lay scattered around us. Guests were already standing, murmuring to each other. Mark slipped out a side door, avoiding everyone's eyes. Emily stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists, as if she still thought she could will the day back into her control. And Daniel, he just looked at me. Not with anger. Not even with gratitude. But with a deep, aching sadness that told me this wasn't over, not yet. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. I didn't do this to hurt you, son. I did it because you deserve the truth. Whatever happens now, that's up to you. He swallowed hard, nodding once. And then, without another word, he walked out of the church. I stayed where I was, the crowd parting around me. Some gave me sympathetic looks. Others avoided my eyes entirely. Karen came to my side, slipping her hand into mine. You did the right thing, she whispered. Maybe I had. But the right thing doesn't always feel good in the moment. As I watched Emily's carefully crafted world collapse in front of her, I knew. Because exposing her lies was only half the story. Making sure she couldn't crawl out of the rubble and do the same to someone else. That was the part one was saving for last. The church emptied slowly like a balloon losing air. Guests shuffled out in small groups, their whispers following them into the cold afternoon. I stayed in the back, watching the swirl of movement around the altar where my son had just ended what was supposed to be the biggest day of his life. Emily was still there. Her white gown no longer looked radiant, it looked like a costume she'd been caught wearing at the wrong party. Her mother hovered beside her, hissing in her ear, while her father barked orders at the groomsmen to clear the mess. Mess. That's what I was to them. A mess to be cleaned up. I didn't move. Not yet. Because the truth was, my work here wasn't finished. Daniel walked back into the church after a few minutes, his jacket gone, his tie hanging loose. He looked drained, older somehow, like the last hour had aged him years. When his eyes met mine, we just stood there. A long moment. No words. Finally he came closer. Dad. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I told him. Not now. Just, don't let her rewrite this in her favor. Not again. He nodded, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. I need to get out of here, he muttered. Then go, I said. I'll handle the rest. Emily caught that. Her head snapped toward me. You'll handle nothing. You've done enough damage for a lifetime. I stepped forward, calm but deliberate. Emily, you've been lying to my son for months. You've poisoned his friendships, smeared my name, and wasted the time and money of every person who came here today. If you think you're just going to walk away and spin this into some sob story where you're the victim, you're mistaken. Her mother scoffed. You can't stop her from telling her side. Maybe not, I said. But I can make sure her side comes with the facts she's been trying to bury. See, what Emily didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been documenting everything for weeks. The text messages Mark's ex had sent me, printed and saved. The overheard comments from her family, recorded on my phone. Even the lies told at the rehearsal dinner, witnesses willing to talk. It hadn't been part of some elaborate plan at first. It started as self-defense, proof I wasn't the monster they were painting me as. But the more I gathered, the more I realized I was holding the key to dismantling her entire facade. I leaned in slightly, my voice low enough so only she and her parents could hear. If you try to smear me, Emily, I will make every one of those messages public. I will send them to your friends, your coworkers, and your family. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why this wedding ended, and it won't be because of some invented story about me. For the first time that day, she didn't have a comeback. Her jaw clenched, her eyes narrowing, but the flicker of fear in them was unmistakable. You think people will believe you over me? She finally said. I don't need them to believe me, I replied. I just need them to see your words in your own handwriting. Her father stepped forward, his voice raised. This is blackmail. No, I said evenly. This is truth. The only difference is I'm willing to use it if I have to. Emily's mother tugged on his arm, whispering furiously, and I saw it the moment they realized I wasn't bluffing. They backed off, though Emily kept her glare locked on me like she could burn a hole straight through my chest. Daniel came back over. I'm leaving, he said again, this time more firmly. I put a hand on his shoulder. I'll walk you to the car. We left the church together. Behind us, the murmur started again, but I didn't look back. On the ride to his apartment, Daniel was quiet. Finally, he said, I should have listened to you months ago. I shook my head. No, you shouldn't have. You had to see it for yourself. If I'd forced you to believe me, you would have resented me. This way, you saw her truth with your own eyes. He gave a dry laugh. Some wedding day. Better no marriage than a bad one, I said. When we reached his place, he stopped me before I could get out of the car. Dad, I don't know if I can fix what I said to you. Telling you not to come, saying you'd ruin things. His voice cracked. I was wrong. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw my son again. The boy I'd raised. The one who promised I'd always have him. You don't have to fix it all today, I told him. Just don't forget who's been in your corner since day one. I could have left it there. I could have considered the matter closed now that Emily was out of his life. But people like Emily, they don't just disappear. They regroup. They reframe the story. And I wasn't about to give her that chance. So I made some calls. First was to Mark's ex-girlfriend, the one who'd sent me the screenshots. I thanked her and asked if she'd be willing to confirm the messages if anyone ever questioned them. She didn't even hesitate. Gladly, she said. She's been getting away with this kind of thing for years. Second was to Karen. I asked her to discreetly talk to a few people who'd been spreading the lies about me. Not confrontational, just enough to let them know the truth was out. Within 24 hours, half of Emily's fabricated stories had been walked back in whispers. But the final step, That was for me. A week later, I posted a simple, factual account of the events on a private social media group where many of the wedding guests were members. No dramatics, no insults. Just the truth, the text messages, the timeline, and a brief statement. I didn't attend my son's wedding to destroy it. I attended to protect him from a betrayal he didn't yet see. These are the facts. Do with them what you will. I didn't need to push it further. The truth has a way of walking on its own once it's out. And walk it did. Within days, I started hearing from mutual acquaintances. Emily had gone quiet online. Mark had apparently moved out of state. Her parents? Keeping their heads down. Whatever image she tried to salvage, it was slipping through her fingers faster than she could hold it. Daniel, on the other hand, started coming around more. Sunday dinners came back. We even took a fishing trip, something we hadn't done since before Margaret passed. One night, sitting on the porch after dinner, he said, "I think you saved me from making the worst mistake of my life." I just smiled. Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie. But it always heals better. As for Emily, I don't know where she is now. I don't care. What I do know is this. The next time she tries to weave her web, she'll find the threads a lot harder to spin. Because people remember the day she stood in a white dress, in front of a church full of witnesses, and got caught. Looking back now, I realize that day in the church wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about reclaiming my voice. For months, I'd been painted as the problem, the bitter father, the meddler, the man who couldn't let go. But the truth has a way of cutting through the noise, even if it shatters the moment you thought you were protecting. I didn't leave that church feeling victorious. I left feeling heavy, but free. Free from the lies. Free from the guilt they tried to hang on my shoulders. And most importantly, free knowing my son had the truth, whether he was ready for it or not. Sometimes the people you love most will wound you the deepest. Sometimes speaking the truth will cost you peace in the short term. But in the long run, it's the only thing that keeps the people you care about from drowning in someone else's lies. I stood up that day because I had to. And I'd do it again because no matter how loud the whispers, silence is never the answer when the truth is at stake. Please subscribe and share this video and let us know where you re-watching from the comment below.